Sharp 5. Hey, hey, I'm Mike Baccarella. This is my good friend Micah Cowell. This is episode 2 of Talking Guitar Podcast. And today we're going to open with the guitar's role in an ensemble. Where does the guitar function? What should we be doing? What should we worry about? What should we not worry about?
Perhaps the most important thing that we can do as guitar players is remember that there are 2 minutes before our solo and after our solo that also matter a whole lot. It's called the entire song that you're playing. And so many people, and it's amazing to me, it's actually surprising how many people don't realize that when you play like lead guitar, quote unquote, in a band, that you actually have to play when you're not playing your solo. And so a great deal of my life as a teacher is spent extolling the virtues of being an ensemble member of the band versus a guy that stands up when it's time for his solo, plays his solo, and then goes back to the chair and sits back down.
So my teacher Bruce Foreman used to always tell me that the idea of leading rhythm guitar is a conspiracy placed on us by the other instrumentalists to keep us dumb. They've been working hard for generations to keep us down.
That's a really plausible
because the way he always breaks it down is there's no such thing as one or the other. You're either playing or you're useful or you're not. And we play a harmony instrument, so we should be able to play harmony and accompany people because that's what we do as a guitar.
That's what the guitar was invented to be.
But at the same time, there's no reason why we shouldn't also be able to play melody because our instrument can do that too. Yeah. Us and the piano are the only two instruments that can kind of do both. Yeah. And that's we need to have control over both.
And the frequencies are such that the guitar is a really pleasant instrument to hear when you play single lines or when you play harmony. So why not be able to do both?
Yeah, and I think it's really important to, when you're playing with guys, is to be present in what's going on. Because we've all met people that when they're trying to play, it doesn't sound like they were part of the band, like it's just like they're doing their own thing. And so I think it's really important, if the trumpet player that took a solo before you or the other guitar player, whoever's playing before you, ended with a really burning line, there's some... Should you start that way or should you give it a second? It's like...
Right, let people breathe. Because that has value too.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we often don't remember. And I'm a little guilty of it just now playing that opening with you when we were trading fours. Because to me, the beauty of the fours is when it feels like it's an extension of the last four. So it's a little bit different than what we're talking about right now. But when you're talking about like a soloist who is finishing their solo and then a new soloist is beginning, it's like a new chapter has started. So don't feel like it's not to be continued. It's a new chapter, so it should begin again. Whereas on the other hand, trading fours like what we just did, it's a little bit, to me at least, I like to visualize the fours as one solo played by two people. And so that's a really nice way for me to kind of keep things separate in my mind when it comes to like the role of the solo at that moment in the tune.
Yeah, and I'm sure, like, I think I was just guilty of it. Like, we were doing a chord thing, and then I went to somewhere else, where I should have maybe responded during the trade, But, like, one thing I like to do, like I do a weekly trio gig, and when I trade fours with the drummer, I like to try to, whatever they play.
Of the drummer.
Exactly. I like to repeat what they're doing and try to make it work for what I'm doing, And then he takes it somewhere else, and then I try to respond.
And, speaking of that, not to cut you off, but a great way to, a great point to this conversation is that you can instantly know if, first of all, if you have any success in playing the rhythm the drummer was playing, if the drummer actually is listening on the gig and acknowledges what you're trying to do, they kind of look up and smile. But sometimes you'll be on a gig and everyone is sort of in their own universe and no one is actually communicating the way that they should be. No one's listening to the other people in the group. And so when you try to do that and you copy, like, say, like the rhythmic phrase that the drummer played in the four and then you play the same thing, they don't even hear it.
Yeah.
And so that you're probably playing with the wrong cat.
Yeah. Yeah, and going back to the guitar's role in the ensemble, but it all has to do with this, So when we're comping, who practices comping? First off, raise your hands at home. But none of us do it enough. Like, I know for a fact, and I'm positive I could probably say you for a fact too, even though, like, I think I love your comping, I think you're great at it. But do you spend, as guitar players, we spend probably 80 to 90% of the time on the bandstand, regardless of what kind of music we're playing, accompanying, and then we have our 10 to 20% of the song just solo. Do we spend 80% of our practice time comping?
Right.
None of us do. Should we? Probably. But none of us are going to, but we should do it more, and, because that's what we're going to be doing most of the time. And we want to be able to be just as free with our comping as we are with our lines and our knowledge of the instrument, because it's all the same thing, And if you're comping for a soloist and they play something and leave a space, can you, without taking over, can you play it back to them?
Right.
You know, and respond and show that we're together now.
Right.
You know, like I do that with Moffat all the time. He'll play a phrase, you know, and I'll be like, you know,
Right.
you know, and he'll leave a space, and so I'll try to respond to it.
Call and response.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and now you don't want to jump up and, you know, take over.
Yeah.
You want to be behind them, and then if they start moving again, you got to get out of the way. But you want to make it something, you know, like
conversational.
Yeah, listen to great compers. Like, you know, I love Herbie McCoy. Jim Hall is probably one of the best ever to play the guitar in comp. You know,
but the thread that runs through all those people though is that they're all wildly active listeners. There's nothing about what anybody that you just mentioned, Keith Jarrett, Gary, like DeJohnette. I mean, it goes the drummers, the great drummers, Eldon, the great drummers, Erskine. You know, the great drummers are all so hyper aware of what's going on around them, and they're reacting in real time to what's going on in a way that makes the song more interesting and more interactional with the people that are playing.
Yeah. Not to cut, but on that same note, one of the best I ever saw doing that, Bruce Foreman used to do this trio gig every week for a little while. He used to say because the restaurant was making too much money, so they wanted to throw it away on a jazz
Hire
gig.
a jazz band.
Yeah. But it was him, Alex Frank on bass, and Marvin Smitty Smith on drums. And Smith, you know, he used to play in the Tonight Show band with Kevin Eubanks during Jay Leno's tenure. Smitty, I've never seen anyone actively listen so well, and like he would, and not to the point where it's a problem or obnoxious, but he would play everything back,
right?
And it was a constant. You know, they were playing a blues one time, and Bruce Foreman goes ba da 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 ba da ba da 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 da, and then Smitty goes ba da da da, you know, to answer Gingerbread Boy, which is a tune, you know, and I've never seen anyone so. If you can find any video of them playing together, check it out, because Smitty is unbelievable at that. You know, he's so not in his world, he's in the world of the music they're creating. And I think that's what we all need to be doing, and it's easier said than done always. You know.
Sure. Well, because it's a stream of consciousness. You have to be aware, and it's hard. You're on a 3-hour, 4-hour job, and you're playing, and you have to be aware for 3 or 4 hours. That's a long time. But then again, that's your job. So like, you know, you should, and if you're lucky enough to get to play music for people who want to hear it, you should be so thrilled that that's your life, that 3 to 4 hours of active listening is a small price to pay.
Yeah.
So I mean that I think that if there's any takeaway from that, it's the fact that like when you're there, you should be all there.
Yeah. And by the same token, we were talking about comping, responding, soloing too. You know, like I alluded to earlier, but when you start your solo, it's the next chapter. It's not a new book.
Right.
You know, and some great examples on Monin. You know, Lee Morgan finishes his trumpet solo, and who's it on? Is it Benny Golson on sax on that?
Monin. That's yeah.
Yeah, and the way ba 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 da ba ba da da, and he responds with the phrase that Lee Morgan ends with, and so okay, now we have a link between the two. And I remember I had this great opportunity when I was in grad school to perform with Guthrie Govan, and I'm sure everyone knows who Guthrie Govan. I don't need to talk about him, you know, tell you who he is, but I remember when we did a rehearsal, because one of our ensembles played one of his tunes, and when we were in rehearsal and for the show, every time, like, we did solos, and first off, Guthrie's an absolute gentleman. When we went there, he walked in, so what's the solo order? Who's going to solo where? And my buddy said, oh, we thought you were just going to solo. He's like, that's not cool. I want to hear you guys play.
Right.
And he was an absolute gentleman. I can't say enough nice things about him. But I soloed before him, and then I had my friend solo after him. So he had to follow it.
Right.
But every time in the rehearsal and the performance, whatever I ended my solo with, he started his with.
Right.
You know, like every one time I was like, I did this, you know, just to kind of be obnoxious, and he started with, and he went back, and every time, because he's an active listener. He's not just playing. Right. He's actually a part of what's going on.
That's right. And so that's a really good point too, because this doesn't have to just be a jazz specific conversation. If you're playing with an Americana band or a funk band or an R&B group, like, you know, you can cite any example of any great player from any genre, and they are doing this. It doesn't have to be something that is like, you know, unique to the jazz world. Like anyone who is a great player is an active listener. Period.
Yeah, listen to the Grateful Dead. Listen to the Allman Brothers.
Right.
Listen to, like, a lot of people like to give a lot of the jam bands flack for just kind of noodling, but listen to how good they are at listening and responding to each other.
Interacting.
String Cheese Incident, Allman Brothers, Fish, anything with Jimmy Herring.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say anything with Jimmy Herring.
Aquarium Rescue, Widespread Panic, all that. Him with Phil Lesh and friends. Him and Warren Haynes together.
Him and Widespread, of course. Like the solo sections, the jam sections are just incredible.
Yeah, and they go somewhere because the whole band is actively listening, and that's what it takes. It's not a jazz thing. It's just a.
It's just
anytime you're improvising.
Yeah.
You want to be there.
Yeah. It's great.